So imagine you're holding a map in your hands. It's got these really crisp, clean lines.
Right, like a standard road map.
Exactly. You start at point A, you follow the brightly colored road, and you end up perfectly safe at point B.
Yeah, that's how we always want things to work.
Right. That's how we expect history or epic events, or even just, our own careers to play out. It's comforting.
Oh, absolutely.
We like to point to a specific battlefield on a map and say, hey, that right there, that is exactly where the war was won.
Or point to a date on a calendar and say, that's the exact day I figured my entire life out.
Exactly. But it's just not how it works, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, it is a deeply human impulse to crave that kind of linearity. We want these grand narratives to operate like a visible mechanical clock.
Yeah, cause and effect, just laid out plain as day.
Right. But then you step into the world of folklore.
Oh, man.
You step into these murky realms of trauma, magical realism, and systemic collapse, and suddenly you realize that map you've been holding.
Yeah.
It's drawn on water.
Wow, drawn on water. That's a great way to put it. The lines are just completely blurring.
Exactly.
And that narrative landscape we're exploring today is, it's the absolute definition of muddy waters. So welcome, everyone, and especially to you, our listener, to today's custom-tailored deep dive.
We have an incredibly rich, sprawling tapestry of source material on the table today.
We really do.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating paradox of a text, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
On its face, it is an epic fantasy saga.
Right.
You have knights, fairies, corrupted forests, and these looming armies of goblin.
All the classic hits.
Right, all the hits. But beneath that aesthetic layer, it operates as this profound philosophical meditation.
Yeah, it's wild. It contains what the text calls an elven glossary.
Which is such a brilliant concept.
It really is. It's basically a collection of concepts that provide highly applicable psychological frameworks for modern issues.
And we're going to unpack how individual stories of bravery, grief, and growth intertwine against the backdrop of this impending supernatural crisis.
Right. But to really understand the stakes, we kind of have to look at the geography and the politics of this world first.
Set the stage a bit.
Exactly. So we're looking at a realm ruled by King Helig. And historically, this kingdom has enjoyed a pretty long era of peace and prosperity.
But right now, something is deeply structurally wrong.
Yeah, it's falling apart. The realm is just being hammered by these unnatural, violent storms.
And we aren't just talking about bad weather here.
No. We're talking about tempests that actually feel malicious. Villages are being torn apart. Ancient forests are rotting from the roots up.
It's an ecological nightmare.
Totally. And out on the borders, you've got these chaotic factions of goblins and trolls. And usually they just fight each other, right?
Right. They're typically unorganized.
But now they're unifying into these organized armies.
The symptoms of a complete systemic collapse are just manifesting everywhere you look.
Yeah. And the framing device the text uses to guide us into this crisis is just brilliant.
It really is. Because we don't start with the king, and we don't start with some brilliant general. We start with a character named Shanshai.
Shanshai, he's a pilgrim, right?
Yes, he's a storyteller from a faraway land who arrives at the imposing fortress of Elinor.
And his role is so crucial because he's not a warrior.
No, not at all.
He's essentially an archivist, like an intelligence analyst of the human and, I guess, non-human condition.
Exactly. His mission, and by extension ours, is to piece together the scattered chaotic fragments of all these isolated events.
Just to understand this dark force that's rising.
Right, and his arrival at the fortress of Elinor really sets the epistemological tone for the entire narrative.
It really does. So the fortress sits on this high vantage point overlooking a river bend.
And it is heavily guarded.
Very heavily guarded. Shanshai approaches in the dead of night, and he encounters two guards who are nearing the end of a really long, exhausting watch.
You have Jurolf.
Right, Jurolf, who is paranoid, prone to sleeping on duty, and honestly absolutely itching to loose an arrow first and ask questions later.
He's on edge.
Totally on edge. And beside him is Joran, who is slightly more measured, but still highly suspicious.
It's the middle of the night.
Right. So Geralt has his bow drawn. He is fully ready to just drop this guy for showing up unannounced.
But Shawnshai doesn't try to intimidate them.
No, he doesn't pull out a sword or,
Yeah.
flash some royal decree. He bypasses their armor with a story.
Which is such a flex.
It really is. He stands there in the dark and starts describing his homeland. He talks about shimmering lakes, emerald forests, dragons soaring above thunderheads.
Just painting this incredible picture.
Yeah, he talks about the northern lights painting the sky in these vibrant, impossible colors.
And he tells these hardened guards that in his land, stories aren't just entertainment.
Right, they become a vital chord in the symphony of their collective history.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But Geralf represents the cynical pragmatist.
Oh yeah, Geralf is not having it.
He isn't swayed by poetic prose at all. He demands utility.
He essentially tells Shawnshai, look, show, don't just tell.
Right. He demands proof of the storyteller's actual skill before he'll even lower his weapon.
And this forces Shawnshai to pivot away from the grand, sweeping imagery. He has to tell a highly intimate, profound story.
A story called The Wax and the Wick.
Yes. Oh, man, I found myself pausing and rereading this specific story like 3 times.
It's incredibly moving.
It really is. So Shawnshai describes a candle sitting in a damp, silent, just depressing room.
And the candle is actively lamenting its fading flame.
It feels entirely used up by this haggard man sitting at the desk.
Right. The candle rasps this agonizing line.
I have it right here. It says, I am lit, consumed, and left to drown in my own wax. And for what?
Wow.
I know. It views the man merely as a thief. Someone stealing its dwindling essence for absolutely no good reason.
It is a striking personification of existential despair.
It really is. But then the climax of the story hits.
The man uses the light.
Yes, the haggard man uses that very candlelight to read a tear-stained letter.
And when he finishes reading, tears spill down his cheeks, and he whispers, "Thank you," into the empty room.
And then he gently blows the candle out.
And in that split second before the dark takes over, the candle has this realization.
Right, it suddenly realizes its sacrifice wasn't a void.
The light it lost allowed someone else to see what they had lost.
And what they still had.
It's just that realization fundamentally alters the nature of the candle's existence.
It's so powerful. And the guards and the keeper of the fortress, who is actually listening from the shadows, are so profoundly moved by this.
They immediately raise the portcullis.
They let him right in. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about the modern workplace or even, modern parenting.
Oh, absolutely.
This story of the candle is the most perfect articulation of burnout and imposter syndrome I've seen in a really long time.
It maps on perfectly.
You are grinding away, you feel like your wick is burning unevenly, the wax is piling up, and you just think, I am being consumed for absolutely nothing.
Because burnout doesn't always come from working too hard.
Right. It comes from working in a void of meaning. You feel like you are drowning in your own wax until you are finally given the context of your impact on someone else.
That is a crucial distinction. The psychological friction of burnout is exactly what the candle is experiencing there.
Yeah, the despair stems entirely from a lack of context.
The candle is focusing solely on its own diminishing mass. But once it understands the why of its burning...
That its literal consumption is providing emotional clarity to a human in pain.
Exactly. Once it sees that, the loss of the wax gains immense meaning. It speaks to a universal craving for utility.
We really can endure almost any consumption of our time and energy if we just believe the light we cast is necessary.
It's a stunning way to open the narrative.
It really is. But Shawnshai's entry into the city doesn't mean he's safe, by the way.
Oh, not at all.
Once he is inside the walls, he buys a turkey leg from a vendor, walks down an alley, and is literally abducted.
Just grabbed right off of the street.
A bag goes over his head, he's dragged through the cobblestone streets, and when the bag comes off, he's face to face with Jaya.
The keeper of the fortress.
Yeah. And Jaya is a phenomenal character.
She really is. She is the custodian of the city's knowledge, and she is fiercely protective of it.
Right. She's deeply suspicious of, intellectual tourists.
People who travel to exotic places to take knowledge for their own amusement, rather than to share it or actually apply it.
Exactly. She doesn't just hand him a library card and say, have fun.
No. She physically forces him to sit in a crowded, dusty garden beneath an ancient banyan tree.
Just to listen to a local sage deliver a sermon.
And the sermon is deeply metaphorical.
It is. The sage tells the crowd that truth is exactly like a lotus flower.
Everyone praises the lotus blossom, right? It's radiant, it smells beautiful, it sits pristinely on top of the water.
But the sage reminds them that the roots of that beautiful blossom are buried deep, deep down in the murky, suffocating mud.
It's a harsh reality check.
It is. People want the flattering words, the radiant bloom of a good story, but they actively ignore the messy, putrid mud that actually draws the nourishment.
The history of philosophy mirrors this sermon perfectly, actually.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, if you look back at early philosophical movements, take the ancient Cynics, for example, a lot of their work was entirely about poking holes in the certainties of men.
Okay, yeah.
They functioned as societal gadflies, asking questions just to tear down the established order. They were constantly pointing out the mud.
Just pointing at the mud and complaining about it.
Right. But the sage under the banyan tree is arguing for a paradigm shift. He is saying that the point of knowledge, the point of acknowledging the mud, isn't just to tear down the illusions of the blossom.
Do something with it.
Exactly. Sages shouldn't just build philosophical temples for people to admire. They should forge tools. The mud represents the messy, unglamorous, difficult realities of human existence.
Trauma, poverty, grief, warfare. So Jaya makes Shawnshai listen to this because she's essentially vetting his epistemology.
She wants to know if he's just a collector of pretty blossoms.
Right. She knows he trades in polished narratives. She needs to ensure he possesses the intellectual courage to wade into the psychological mud.
Because if he is going to document the dark force rising in the kingdom, he cannot avert his eyes from the ugliness that feeds it.
And she officially greenlights him. She hands him this massive, heavy history book.
A repository of difficult truths from a bygone age.
And the preface of the book actually warns the reader that words are like sparks, ready to catch fire.
Which is setting us up for the realization that knowledge isn't passive, it's highly volatile.
It is a profound transition, because while Shawnshai is safe inside the walls of the monastery, grappling with the theoretical concepts of historical mud,
the text violently yanks our perspective out into the actual king.
Yes, we leave the theoretical storms of the library and we are thrust right into the visceral, terrifying reality of actual physical tempests battering the countryside.
The narrative takes us straight to Lakeside.
Right. It's described as this idyllic, Alsace-style town nestled in a coastal cove. But right now, it is getting absolutely hammered by an unprecedented weather event.
And here we meet Jack.
Jack! Oh, man, Jack is struggling.
He's a young guy who feels entirely aimless.
Yeah, we learn he tried to be a blacksmith and failed miserably. He works on a fishing boat, but can't even tie a proper bowline knot.
Which is a highly specific, revealing detail, by the way.
Is it? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the bowline is often called the king of knots in maritime culture.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It creates a fixed loop at the end of a rope that will not slip or tighten under immense load. The harder you pull, the tighter it holds. It is literally the knot you use to rescue someone.
Wow.
The fact that Jack cannot tie it symbolizes his inability to secure himself, let alone anyone else, in the currents of his own life.
That is such a great catch. He's totally adrift. He literally stands by his window watching the storm and thinks, if the wind carries me away tonight, would anyone even notice?
He's drowning in apathy.
But then the external crisis shatters his internal paralysis. The storm rolls in hard, lightning strikes, and the neighboring Watson family's house bursts into flames.
Despite the pouring rain.
Yeah, despite the rain, it is the ultimate test of the theoretical concepts we just discussed.
Exactly.
Jack's mother is terrified. She is begging him to stay inside, screaming that it's too dangerous. But Jack looks out the window and says, "Why would I sit and watch?"
He grabs a heavy lantern and throws himself out into the howling wind.
Sleet and flying debris everywhere. He finds the Watsons in a state of total devastation. Their roof is shattered, their belongings are ruined, and they are paralyzed by shock.
And Jack takes control.
He physically leads this family through the flooded, treacherous, debris-filled streets, fighting the gale, and brings them back to the safety of his mother's living room.
And we immediately see this isn't an isolated reaction. His sister, Rose, demonstrates the exact same impulse.
Right. The house is now packed with the soaking wet, traumatized Watson family. But Rose realizes their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Crandall, is still out there.
So Rose wraps herself in a heavy cloak and braves the tempest herself.
She fights her way next door and finds Mrs. Crandall, incredibly, just sitting calmly by her fireplace, knitting a scarf.
Completely unbothered.
Totally unbothered, but totally isolated. So Rose stays with her to ensure she's safe.
What we're observing here is the neurology of altruism in real time.
The neurology of altruism, I like that.
In moments of extreme, chaotic crisis, the human amygdala, the brain's fear, center fires rapidly.
Right, resulting in freeze, flight, or fight.
Exactly. Jack's baseline state was a kind of depressive freeze. But when confronted with the immediate visceral danger of his neighbors, his pro-social survival instincts override his personal apathy.
So stepping into the storm to help someone else actually downregulates his own fear response.
Yes, action becomes the antidote to despair.
That's amazing. And we see this exact mechanism replicated miles away in the lush village of Greenvale,
Where we are introduced to Sophia.
Right. Sophia works as a clerk for a notoriously grumpy apothecary. Her daily life consists of dusting jars of lion's mane mushroom and willow bark.
She is safe, but she is deeply restless.
She constantly daydreams about leaving and sailing to glittering, faraway cities. But when the massive gale sweeps down into the Greenvale Valley, rattling the shop signs and tearing shingles off the roofs, her focus narrows entirely to the present.
She sees the local innkeeper, Oliver, outside in the howling wind.
Yeah, he's precariously balanced on a wobbly wooden ladder trying to hammer boards over his windows.
And Sophia doesn't retreat into the apothecary shop. She steps out into the tempest.
She walks right up to the ladder, grabs the sides, and physically anchors it for him with her own body weight.
She even yells up to him over the wind, joking that she isn't afraid of a little rain.
But the true depth of her character is really revealed on her way home. She's soaking wet, the wind is biting, and as she passes a dark alley, she hears a faint, pathetic whimpering.
She investigates and finds a starving, terrified stray dog wedged behind a trash bin.
Just shivering uncontrollably.
A lesser person would assume the dog is a lost cause or someone else's problem.
But not Sophia. She drops to her knees in the freezing, driving rain. She ignores the thunder, speaks to the animal in a low, calm voice to build trust.
And then reaches into the dark.
She pulls this filthy, wet dog out and cradles it tightly against her own chest to share her body heat. She shields it from the storm with her own body all the way to the local animal shelter.
These intertwining narratives of Jack and Sophia lead us to our first major entry from the text's Elven glossary.
Right. The term is rummeloiti. It translates directly to the winged anchor.
The glossary provides such fascinating real-world linguistic parallels here.
It does. It connects rummeloiti to the Japanese concept of tamadachi, which goes beyond casual friendship into deep loyalty.
And the French concept of solidarité.
Right. The text defines it as the unwavering, selfless act of braving adverse conditions to offer support to a friend in need, standing together in the face of insurmountable challenges.
The etymology of the Elven word itself is a beautiful contradiction, actually. Rama means wing, implying flight, movement, and vulnerability to the wind.
Okay.
And loiti means to fail or falter. Combined, it creates a concept of an anchor that possesses wings but refuses to fail in the wind.
An anchor with wings. That's such a striking image.
It evokes the mental image of two entities bracing against a hurricane. The philosophical assertion here is that weathering a storm together doesn't just display connection. The shared resistance actually forges the connection.
Wow. The text actually pairs this definition with a guided meditation practice, too.
Yes, it asks the reader to close their eyes and visualize their own mind as a massive cyclone.
Right. All your anxieties, your imposter syndrome, your grief, that's the swirling debris of the hurricane.
But the meditation guides you to find the eye of the storm.
The center of low pressure where the air is completely still and untouched by the chaos. So I'm thinking about this in application. How do Jack and Sophia actually embody this highly abstract meditation?
Consider the mechanism of their actions. The storm they are facing is terrifyingly physical. But the reason the text highlights their actions is the psychological resilience it demands and creates.
Yeah.
When Jack is physically guiding the Watsons through the floodwaters, or when Sophia is gripping that wobbly ladder, they are locating their inner sanctuary.
By practicing Ramaloisi, they ground themselves.
Exactly. They aren't paralyzed by the flying debris because their focus is entirely exterior, on the survival of the Watsons, on the safety of Oliver, on the warmth of the stray dog. They inadvertently become the calm, untouched center of the hurricane for those around them.
Their altruism is the anchor.
Perfectly said.
I love that reframing. They don't find the calm center by retreating to a quiet room to meditate. They find the calm center by stepping into the chaos for someone else.
It's an active meditation.
But while Jack and Sophia are using the storm to find their footing, the narrative reveals that others are being drawn directly to the dark, supernatural root cause of these tempests.
Yes. The focus pulls back from the societal response to the storms and dives deep into their ecological and magical origins.
And this introduces us to perhaps the most psychologically complex character in the saga.
Maria.
Maria. She was a seamstress, and she has recently fled her bustling hometown of Middlewich to live in the deeply isolated, quiet village of Briarwood.
But she isn't seeking a vacation.
No, she is a refugee running from a crushing, ambiguous grief. We learn that her husband, Peter, was taken in a vicious, sudden goblin raid.
And the most devastating part is that there was no body to bury.
Right. The people in Middlewich started whispering terrible, conflicting rumors about what happened to him, and the social noise just became unbearable, so she fled.
Maria is a character entirely defined by unresolved trauma. She's carrying a psychological wound that has never been allowed to close or scar over.
And because her internal landscape has been so violently disrupted, she is hyper-attuned to disruptions in her external environment.
Exactly. Everyone else in Briarwood just complains about the rain.
But Maria notices the subtle, terrifying details. She looks at the ancient trees in her garden and sees that the leaves are yellowing listlessly, completely out of season.
The air itself feels tainted, heavy, and wrong.
She realizes this isn't meteorological, it's ancient and it's malicious.
Her trauma has stripped away her naivety. She knows what a monster looks like, so she can sense when one is breathing nearby.
One night, the storm is raging outside her cottage. Instead of hiding under the covers, she sits by the window and prays the rosary.
And the text includes this stunning reflection here.
It describes the rain tapping against the glass as the sky trying to write a language that humans aren't fluent in. It's a reminder that nothing in nature stays static.
And as she's watching the tree line, she sees these faint, erratic, flickering blue lights deep in the forest.
The will-o'-the-wisps.
Now, in traditional folklore, will-o'-the-wisps are incredibly dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
They are atmospheric ghost lights seen over bogs, and they are notorious for leading desperate travelers astray into the sinking mud to drown.
But Maria doesn't lock her door. Driven by this desperate need for the truth, she packs a small bag of candy as an offering,
Throws on her cloak.
and walks directly into the darkest part of the thicket. And the wisps behave exactly as the legends say. They are chaotic, mischievous, giggling in the dark, darting behind trees, and leading her in dizzying circles.
But eventually, they guide her to the heart of the corruption.
They bring her to a massive, ancient banyan tree.
And the visual of this tree is deeply unsettling.
It is. It has a jagged, blackened scar running the entire length of its massive trunk. Its sprawling aerial roots are visibly ensnared by a pulsing dark spell.
The wisps stop giggling and warn her that a subdued ancient darkness is stirring.
A force actively corrupting the very roots of the forest. Maria reaches out and touches the blackened bark.
In the moment her skin makes contact, she is hit with a terrifying, visceral vision.
A towering, shadowy figure marching into the forest with the intent to eradicate it.
The sheer scale of the malice breaks her composure.
She drops her lantern and runs back to her cottage in absolute blinding terror. But as she runs, she makes a vow to herself that she will return, but next time, with allies.
Her encounter at the tree is pivotal. Before this, her anxiety was a generalized, ambiguous dread.
Right.
Touching the tree transforms her fear of the unknown into a tangible, defined reality. She has identified the pathogen,
But the sheer magnitude of this darkness is entirely overwhelming for one person.
which necessitates a profound intervention.
And that intervention happens a few days later. Maria is taking a twilight stroll, trying to process the terror of the vision when she encounters Harper.
Harper is a fairy.
Right, sitting quietly by a pond filled with gently glowing water lilies. The wisps, who led Maria to the tree, have surrounded Maria again, and they're seemingly communicating her hardships to Harper.
Harper listens, and then, using a voice described as angelic, she composes and sings a custom healing song exclusively for Maria.
The song is titled A Glade Where I Cannot Go. I want to pause here because this is a masterclass in psychological storytelling.
Let's break this down.
Yeah, because when I was reading about the wisps leading Maria into the dark woods, I couldn't stop comparing them to human intuition.
Oh, that's an interesting connection.
Intuition is so often erratic, it's mischievous, it rarely speaks to us in clear, logical sentences.
No, it flashes like a blue light in the periphery.
Exactly, constantly pointing out the uncomfortable truths that our rational brains are desperately trying to ignore. But then we get to Harper's song, and this is where I was genuinely surprised.
Because Harper is a magical fairy.
Right, but her song doesn't magically fix the corrupted roots of the banyan tree. It doesn't resurrect Peter, it doesn't erase the goblin threat. So functionally, what is the point of this song for Maria?
Well, let's look closely at the framework of a glade where I cannot go. It functions as a psychological balm for complex trauma. The lyrics are incredibly deliberate. Harper sings about hearing the brook speak of distant, pristine places where starlight pools in silver bowls.
Describing a sacred, untouched glade beyond the veil of the world's suffering.
But the crucial moment, the crux of the song, is the admission in the chorus. The glade calls to me still, but I am too small to hold such vastness. Perhaps somewhere, in a place I cannot go, another being hears my song.
It's a song about boundaries.
Exactly. The song explicitly acknowledges the existence of the glade where I cannot go. For Maria, that glade represents the past.
The idealized, peaceful life she had with Peter before the raid.
Yes, a timeline that was violently stolen from her and is now permanently inaccessible.
Wow, so Harper isn't giving her a spell to forget her pain. She's giving Maria explicit permission to grieve what is permanently lost without demanding that she get over it.
In clinical psychology, we refer to this as radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance.
By acknowledging that the glade exists, but that she cannot enter it, Marie is freed from the agonizing, exhausting mental loop of trying to claw her way back to the past.
The song validates the profound depth of her longing, but gently reminds her that her life must continue outside of that unreachable space.
This acceptance is the alchemy that turns her paralyzing fear into the quiet, resolute strength she will need to face the impending war.
That is so deeply resonant, and the text shows us the immediate results of this internal alchemy. Her renewed strength directly impacts how she navigates her life and her relationships back in the village.
Which brings us to a fascinating timeline overlap.
Right, because Maria, the traumatized seamstress, actually has a history with Jack.
The aimless guy we saw earlier who saved the family from the fire.
Yes. The narrative structure here weaves their paths together to explore the deeply human complexities of connection, specifically love, rejection, and the difficult process of maturation.
We get this incredibly charming, hilarious scene set at a bustling fish market.
Oh my gosh, yes. Jack, who we know has a good heart but is deeply immature and adrift, is completely smitten with Maria.
He spots her walking among these crates of smelly ice lake fish.
And Jack decides this is his moment. He swaggers up to her and tries to woo her using the most cliché, cheesy pickup lines imaginable.
He literally asks her to join him for a swim in the ocean of love.
Promising an adventure where they will swim with dolphins and playfully get tangled in romantic seaweed.
Is an absurd approach, especially considering the environment.
And Maria, who is guarding a heart that has been shattered by the loss of Peter, handles this with perfect surgical comedic timing.
She shoots him down instantly, but without malice.
She reminds him of a past date, a total disaster, where they rented a rowboat, lost the oars, ended up stranded on a jagged rock for hours, and had to watch seagulls devour their entire picnic.
And even when a fishmonger accidentally drops a slippery fish and it flies through the air, forcing them both to duck, Jack tries to spin it.
He claims the flying fish is a sign from the universe bringing them together.
And Maria just laughs out loud.
She says no, it's a sign they need to stand much further away from fishmongers with terrible aim.
This interaction isn't just comedic relief. It illustrates our next elven glossary term, malevolent, the saffron veil.
The etymology here is mele, meaning love, and malda, meaning goal or yellow.
The text draws parallels to the German concept of taktful, meaning highly tactful.
And the Japanese aesthetic of ukiyo, the floating world, living in the moment detached from the bothers of life.
The glossary defines malevolent as the refined art of gracefully and critically, humorously declining a romantic or flirtatious advance.
While actively preserving the light-hearted, friendly rapport between the two people, it is the skill of softening the blow of rejection to protect the connection.
It is striking that an epic fantasy pauses the buildup of a brewing war to focus on the emotional intelligence required to reject someone without destroying their dignity.
It elevates a mundane human interaction to the level of martial arts.
Maria isn't cruel. She doesn't humiliate Jack or attack his worth. And because she employs malevolent, Jack isn't shattered.
The saffron veil allows them to continue their witty banter without the crushing, suffocating weight of awkwardness or unrequited expectations ruining their dynamic.
It is modern social intelligence codified into ancient lore.
How to decline someone without ghosting them or crushing their soul. And we see that it works because Jack continues to show up for her.
He drops the cheesy lines and starts leaving small, genuine bouquets of wildflowers on her doorstep.
He starts showing a quiet care that actually begins to crack the defensive walls around Maria's heart. They are genuinely bonding, but then reality intrudes.
Maria receives a desperate letter.
Her hometown of Middlewich, the place she fled, has been utterly devastated by the unnatural storms. Her parents are homeless and need her immediately, so she has to leave Briarwood.
She packs her bags.
Jack is heartbroken, but instead of throwing a tantrum, he is incredibly supportive. He helps her pack and tells her simply that he will be waiting if she ever returns.
Jack's reaction to her departure is a crucible that forces him to embody another crucial glossary term: Nesanari, the lotus flame.
The text relates Nesanare to the Greek philosophical concept of aletheia, which is the state of not being hidden or the disclosure of truth.
And the Sanskrit satya, the virtue of truthfulness.
The Elven definition is the transformative process of personal growth that occurs only when you fearlessly seek and embrace a hard truth, even when it is deeply uncomfortable or painful.
Up until this point, Jack has lived in a state of avoidance. He avoided his failures as a blacksmith. He avoided his lack of skill on the boat.
But here, he cannot avoid the truth that Maria is gone.
And that her duty lies with her family, not with him. The easy, immature path would be to succumb to bitterness or resentment, to claim she led him on.
But he doesn't. He experiences Nesanari. He lets the painful truth burn away his childish entitlement. This acceptance is what begins to temper his character into something resilient.
Exactly.
But I need to interject here, because the pacing of the narrative threw me for a loop right here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because shortly after Maria leaves, Jack travels back to the Valley of Greenvale to purchase lumber to repair the Watsons' roof. And while he's there, another massive flash flood hits the valley.
And Jack is caught in the open and gets swept away by the churning, muddy rapids.
Right. And it is Sophia, the apothecary clerk, who saved the stray dog, who spots him. She braces her feet against solid stone fence posts, reaches into the raging water, and physically drags Jack onto the bank, saving his life.
After the floodwaters recede, they spend days side by side, covered in mud, helping the town healer, Mrs. Swiftbrook, splint broken legs and bandage the injured.
Through this grueling shared trauma, they bond deeply. They end up sitting on a grassy hill overlooking the ruined valley, sharing their deepest dreams, and they fall in love.
It is a rapid escalation of intimacy born of crisis.
Right, but I found myself questioning Jack's emotional authenticity.
Why is that?
Well, he goes from being utterly heartbroken over Maria to declaring his love for Sophia in what feels like a remarkably short window. Does his seemingly quick transition from Maria to Sophia imply that his feelings for Maria weren't actually real or profound?
I strongly argue the exact opposite, actually.
Okay, lay it on me.
Consider the mechanics of his growth. The text explicitly inserts an old proverb here. Only love can break a heart. Only love can mend one.
Right.
Jack's feelings for Maria were profoundly real, precisely because they changed him. His experience of Nesanari standing in the fire of the hard truth of her departure did not erase Maria from his history.
It matured his emotional capacity.
Exactly. Because he allowed his heart to be broken by Maria without turning bitter, he kept his heart open.
So the heartbreak was a prerequisite for the new relationship.
When he meets Sophia, he is no longer the immature boy trying to use slick pickup lines at a fish market. He is emotionally primed to recognize and appreciate Sophia's quiet, fierce compassion.
That makes perfect sense when you look at the scene on the grassy hill. Sophia opens up to him about her daydreams. She talks about wanting to sail across the ocean to sparkling, distant cities, wearing a beautiful turquoise gown.
Leaving the dusty apothecary behind.
The old Jack would have promised to build her a boat right then and there. But the tempered Jack just listens. He looks at her and says, simply and quietly, "I love you. I can't keep it to myself anymore."
It's incredibly grounded. There's no performance.
They promise to shape a future together, whether that means eventually sailing to those foreign cities or staying right there to rebuild Greenvale. They have found their wind anchor in each other.
But while Jack and Sophia are making promises and trying to build a future, the perspective of the text violently shifts again.
Yes, we zoom out from the grassy hill to the macro level of the kingdom's governance. Because while the citizens are finding love, the leaders of the realm are fighting a brutal, desperate war to ensure those citizens actually have a future to build.
This plunges us into the strategy, the politics, and the dirty tricks of the defenders of the realm.
This shift is vital. The narrative forces us to examine how leadership must adapt when faced with systemic collapse. We are reintroduced to King Helig.
He is sitting on his throne, but he is a man deeply weary of warfare.
He is haunted by the cost of his father's previous military campaigns. He remembers the depleted royal treasuries, the decimated farmland, and most vividly, the empty chairs at the dinner tables of his subjects.
Helig knows that the old ways of simply marching an army out to crush an enemy won't work against this new magical corruption.
So he makes an unprecedented administrative move. He creates a brand new title, Protector of the Kingdom.
And he appoints a young woman named Elinor to the role.
Now, Elinor is fascinating. She was raised in the rugged western woods. She isn't just a heavily armored meathead who solves every problem by swinging a broadsword.
She is highly educated, and she understands that true defense requires bridging diplomacy, strategy, and kinetic force.
We learn her father died holding a choke point against invaders when she was only 12, so she learned from a very young age how to read the forest like a tactical map.
King Helig's appointment of Elinor is a profound acknowledgement that brute force is a hammer, and not every threat is a nail.
And Elinor's strategic mindset is immediately bolstered by correspondence she receives from Queen Boudica.
The Queen is currently overseas in East Mercy, trying to recruit scholars and mages to their cause.
Boudica's letter to Elinor is an absolute masterclass in executive leadership. I want to frame this and put it in a boardroom.
Is that good?
She advises Elinor to prioritize absolute transparency with her troops, to actively seek common ground with local village leaders instead of just demanding compliance, and to cultivate decisive action over perfect planning.
But the line that stopped me in my tracks was this: a leader must know the crucial difference between a problem and a predicament.
Yes, that sentence is the philosophical core of systemic management. It requires a massive deep dive to unpack.
A problem is a specific, isolated issue that has a definable solution. A flat tire is a problem. You change the tire, and the status quo is restored.
But
A predicament, however, is a complex, systemic condition that cannot be solved. It has no single point of failure and no single fix. It is an environment that you must endure, navigate, and fundamentally adapt to. Aging is a predicament. Climate change is a predicament.
So Queen Boudica is warning Elinor not to treat the unified goblins and the rotting forests as a flat tire.
Precisely. If Elinor treats this as a problem, she will march an army into the woods, kill some goblins, declare victory, and go home, only to have the realm collapse a month later.
By recognizing it as an existential predicament, Elinor understands she must fundamentally alter the kingdom's approach to survival.
And Elinor is forced to test this new paradigm immediately.
Intelligence reports come in that goblins are burning merchant wagons along the Ridge Road in the western woods.
But Elinor reads the tactical map and realizes these aren't the chaotic, random, smash-and-grab raids of the past.
The goblins are establishing a coordinated, fortified presence. They're cutting off supply lines, so Elinor bypasses traditional military doctrine.
She doesn't summon the royal army.
She doesn't blow war horns or fly the king's banners. She leads a surgical, stealth strike force consisting of just 40 seasoned rangers and 60 local volunteers, slipping silently into the dense, wet woods.
The tactical discipline required for this maneuver is staggering. The text doesn't shy away from the grueling reality of this march.
As they are creeping through the underbrush, maintaining absolute silence, the platoon is suddenly swarmed by a massive, blinding cloud of ravenous midges.
It sounds like a nightmare.
The bugs are biting their faces, flying into their eyes and mouths. Every human instinct screams at you to break rank, to flail your arms, to swat at the swarm.
But Elinor uses silent hand signals to command her troops to hold their formation.
They throw their thick wool cloaks over their heads and endure the agonizing bites, because Elinor knows that breaking formation and making noise would alert the goblin scouts and lead them straight into a lethal ambush.
That discipline pays off. They manage to reach the goblin encampment undetected. But when they crest the ridge, the scale of the threat is terrifying.
It isn't a small raiding party, it is half a horde, deeply entrenched.
Elinor realizes instantly she has led her volunteers onto what tacticians call death ground. There is no retreat. It is fight and win or die.
She signals the attack. The rangers lock their shields, and the battle that follows is a chaotic, brutal clash of iron and mud. It isn't glorified. It is desperate survival.
In the center of the melee, Elinor finds herself dueling the goblin chieftain.
He is a massive, hulking brute, easily twice her size. But as they cross blades, Elinor notices something chilling. The chieftain isn't fighting with a crude, rusted cleaver.
He is wielding a masterfully forged, stolen knight steel broadsword.
That single detail is the proof of the predicament. The enemy is appropriating the kingdom's own technology.
Elinor uses her agility to survive. She realizes she can't block his strikes, so she continuously parries, analyzing his stance until she targets a weakness in his heavily armored left leg.
She lands a critical strike, brings him to his knees, and slays him, breaking the Horde's morale and securing the victory.
But as she wipes the blood from her blade, she realizes the rules of engagement have permanently changed.
The enemy is adapting rapidly, which brings us to the most controversial military figure in the text, and a stark contrast to Elinor's surgical precision, Sir Edward.
Sir Edward embodies the old guard. He's an incredibly wealthy, arrogant knight. He owns a sprawling manor, rides a massive chestnut warhorse, and wears shining, immaculate armor.
He is entirely invested in the aesthetic and the rigid rules of traditional chivalry.
We meet Edward on the practice field where he is sparring with his mentor, an older, grizzled veteran named Sir Lowe.
They are practicing standard, highly choreographed sword forms, and Sir Lowe stops the spar to impart a deeply counterintuitive piece of wisdom.
He looks at Edward and says, "The greatest swordsman in the world does not fear the second best swordsman. He fears the worst."
And to demonstrate his point, Sir Lowe abruptly drops his practice sword, reaches down to the dirt, scoops up a handful of loose stones, and hurls them violently right into Edward's faceplate.
Sir Edward is completely incensed. He drops his guard, pulls off his helmet, and accuses Sir Lowe of a dishonorable low blow.
It's such a great scene. I was laughing, but the logic is undeniable. It's like sitting down to play a highly complex board game with someone who has never read the rules.
Right.
You spend 6 turns building this masterful, invisible strategy, anticipating their counter moves, and then they make a completely illegal, chaotic, absurd move that instantly ruins your entire plan simply because you couldn't possibly anticipate such stupidity.
Precisely. Sir Lowe explains the mechanism behind the metaphor. The second-best swordsman has been trained in the same academies. He follows the same rhythm, the same footwork, the same rules of engagement. He is entirely predictable.
But the worst swordsman, the untrained fool, does not adhere to any rules.
He doesn't know the proper parry, so he might throw a wild off-balance haymaker. He will leverage any dirty trick, bite, gouge, or throw rocks. His ignorance makes his geometry of attack completely unpredictable, which makes him incredibly lethal to someone relying on a script.
And the universe immediately forces Edward to test this lesson. Word reaches the manor that a pack of massive, feral trolls has been sighted in the dense forest near Edward's estate.
Trolls are the ultimate unpredictable enemy. They are chaotic, driven entirely by hunger and rage.
Edward rides out with his men-at-arms. Because the forest is so dense, they have to dismount and leave their horses behind. They attempt to sneak up on the troll encampment, but the wind shifts, the trolls catch their scent, and they charge.
These aren't creatures you can parry. They are 10 feet tall, swinging crude wooden clubs the size of tree trunks.
Traditional phalanx formations and chivalric sword stances are instantly useless. If you try to block a troll's club with a sword, your arms will shatter.
Edward is faced with a terrifying choice. He can die with honor, adhering to the rules of chivalry, or he can adapt.
As the lead troll charges him, roaring, Edward doesn't raise his sword to block. He drops to one knee, digs his gauntleted hand into the earth, scoops up a massive handful of sharp gravel and dirt, and hurls it straight into the troll's face and open throat.
The troll is blinded, starts choking and coughing violently, dropping its club.
Edward's men immediately break formation, flank the incapacitated beast, and bring it down. They win the skirmish.
But I've found myself conflicted reading this.
Yeah.
If chivalry is supposed to be the foundational high moral standard of this society, isn't Edward throwing dirt in an enemy's eyes a total betrayal of his vows as a knight?
This requires us to examine the actual historical origins of chivalry, which the text explicitly references through an in-universe book titled Fighting is an Art.
Okay, tell me about that.
The romanticized version of chivalry, the unyielding honor, the fair play, is largely a retroactive fiction. Historically, chivalric codes did not begin as high moral philosophy. They began as highly pragmatic economic agreements between wealthy noble classes.
Wait, really? It was about money.
Entirely. It was a mutual agreement for ransoming captured knights. If 2 nobles fought, they agreed not to slaughter each other, but to capture each other and demand a ransom from their respective estates.
Oh, wow.
It was born of mutual self-preservation and financial interest. It was a set of rules designed for fighting peers. It was never intended to apply to fighting a monstrous, unthinking threat.
That completely changes the context of Edward's action.
The text argues that true courage isn't blindly marching into your own slaughter just to uphold a rigid, outdated aesthetic. True courage requires the humility to accept when your tools are obsolete.
Edward accepts that his immense strength and his expensive sword are useless against the physics of a giant troll. By throwing the gravel, he embraces absolute adaptability.
In a predicament, adaptability is survival. He preserves not just his own life, but the lives of his men-at-arms.
That humility is such a shift for his character. When they return to the manor, Sir Low comes out to inspect the troops. He is genuinely shocked that they survived an encounter with the troll pack without major casualties.
He asks Edward what grand strategy he employed, and Edward, shedding his usual arrogance, just smirks and admits it was a chaotic ambush and a very dirty trick.
Edward's survival, however, creates a logistical problem. The text notes that during these skirmishes, Edward keeps ruining his incredibly expensive steel blades by instinctively trying to parry glancing blows from troll clubs.
The steel chips and bends. He needs weapons designed for this new warfare, which leads us perfectly into the literal and metaphorical heat of the craftsman who supplies the realm's defense.
We step out of the forest and into the intense, blistering heat of Section 6, the forge and the hearth.
We are introduced to Finn, the master blacksmith. Finn's forge is described as a deafening symphony of ringing metal, roaring fire, and hissing steam.
He is currently working on a commission, forging a very specific, unique, incredibly lightweight thrusting sword.
The fascinating detail is that Finn doesn't actually know who the sword is destined for yet, but he feels compelled to make it perfect, and the text provides an incredibly deep dive into the actual chemistry and metallurgy of his work.
It is a stunningly accurate depiction of historical metallurgy. Finn doesn't just heat up an iron bar and hit it. He is engaged in elemental alchemy.
He takes raw, brittle iron ore and places it in a smelting crucible. He adds coal coke, which infuses the iron with carbon to give it structural strength. But raw iron is full of sulfur and impurities that create microscopic weaknesses in the blade.
So Finn adds crushed limestone to the crucible.
I had to look this up because I wanted to know how this works. When the crucible reaches extreme temperatures, the limestone decomposes and bonds chemically with the sulfur and the silicates in the iron.
It creates a liquid waste product called slag, which floats to the top of the molten metal, allowing Finn to literally skim the weakness right out of the steel.
This chemical process perfectly illustrates the next concept from the Elven glossary, Minnolomi, the Twilight Forge.
The glossary relates this term to the Japanese industrial philosophy of Kaizen, which means continuous, incremental improvement, and the German concept of Gestaltung, meaning the intentional shaping or forming of a system.
The Elven definition of Minnolomi is the artful, agonizing process of transforming raw, flawed material through conditions of extreme stress and extreme heat into something possessing enhanced resilience.
It is a metamorphosis through suffering. Heating, striking, quenching in oil. The metal must be repeatedly traumatized to become strong.
And if we look at the limestone bonding with the impurities to create slag, we can map that perfectly onto the sociological themes of the text.
The heat is the trauma of the looming war. The raw iron is the terrified populace. The limestone, the bonding agent that draws out the bitterness and the weakness, is community.
That is an incredible metaphor. The community draws the slag out of the individual. And while Finn is performing this violent alchemy with a hammer and anvil, his wife, Mary, is performing a much quieter but equally vital alchemy in her kitchen.
Mary is the matriarch of the village. She is practical, she always has soot on her apron, she knows which herbs cure a fever, and she has an expansive, fiercely protective heart.
She represents the domestic anchor of civilization.
Earlier that day, Mary was walking through the chaotic village market and spotted a young, scrawny girl wearing a patched, filthy dress, trying to steal an apple.
Instead of calling the guards, Mary grabs the girl by the ear, marches her back to her cottage, sits her down in the warm kitchen, and puts her to work helping to prepare a massive hearty beef stew.
This simple act of domestic inclusion introduces the term oromelier, the heart-woven basket.
The glossary ties this to the Zulu philosophy of Ubuntu, often translated as I am because we are, emphasizing the universal bond of sharing that connects all humanity.
And the Japanese concept of omotenashi, which is a deep, mindful, selfless hospitality.
Oromeli is defined as the warm, intentional experience of preparing a meal or a gift not out of obligation, but pouring genuine care into the process to actively deepen the bonds between people.
It is the deliberate construction of a safe harbor. Mary and her friend Emily bring the runaway girl to the massive wooden table. They start baking bread.
They explain the process to her, showing her how the dormant, dry yeast wakes up when introduced to warm water and sugar, how it breathes and fundamentally transforms the dense flour into something light and sustaining.
When I look at Finn swinging a heavy hammer in the forge Miniolomi and Mary patiently kneading dough in the kitchen Oramili, I realize they are executing the exact same function.
They are both taking raw, unrefined, disparate ingredients, applying heat, applying time, and creating the absolute necessities required to sustain the realm.
They are the twin pillars of civilization. The forge provides the shield that defends the walls, and the hearth provides the nourishment that gives the soldiers the strength to carry those shields. Neither can survive the predicament without the other.
And the runaway orphan girl they bring into this warmth is a truly compelling character. While they are baking, we learn her brutal backstory.
She was abandoned as an infant at an orphanage run by the tyrannical Sister Thorn.
Sister Thorn is a monster of conformity. She literally beats the children with a heavy cane if they dare to ask questions about the outside world. She demands total submission.
But this little girl possessed an innate, unbreakable defiance. She taught herself to pick the heavy iron locks on the doors using nothing but bent hairpins she found on the floor.
Her mind was constantly searching for the mechanics of escape.
One night, during a heavy rainstorm, she executes her plan. She stuffs her lumpy mattress with old sheets to make it look like she's sleeping, picks the lock on her window, squeezes her tiny frame through the rusted iron bars, and drops into the muddy alley below.
She is completely alone in a terrifying city, but she is guided through the winding, dangerous streets by an old, battle-scarred, stray tabby cat named Leo.
This harrowing escape sequence introduces the concept of kalakale, the ascending lantern.
The text connects this to the Zen Buddhist concept of satori, a sudden, comprehensive flash of awakening or enlightenment, and the Greek dramatic concept of peripeteia, a sudden reversal of fortune or circumstances.
The Elven definition is the profound, irreversible moment of clarity when an individual pierces the veil of intimidation and fully embraces their authentic truth.
As she is navigating the dark, flooded streets, terrified of being caught by the city watch, she uses a coping mechanism. She talks to the stray cat, Leo.
And in her hyper-stressed imagination, Leo talks back to her in this gritty, cynical, street-smart voice, giving her tactical advice.
In the middle of this internal dialogue, she comes to a massive realization. She decides she no longer wants to be known by the designation the orphanage gave her. Alice Elizabeth, born May 15th.
That name is a prison sentence. So standing there in the rain, she decides to name herself. She chooses the name Estrilda. Wild Estrilda.
I found myself cheering for her in that moment. I want your analysis on this. Why is the specific act of changing her name the catalyst for her Kalakali moment? Why couldn't she just be a brave runaway named Alice?
Let's consider the psychology of naming. At the orphanage, Alice's identity was entirely dictated by an oppressive authority. She was repeatedly told she was insignificant, told she would grow up to be a lowly maid, told her entire origin story was just a date scribbled on a piece of administrative paper.
By consciously leaving that name in the mud and choosing Estrilda, she is actively refusing the narrative written for her by Sister Thorn.
She is seizing the pen. It is the ultimate assertion of agency. She's declaring that she is no longer a product of her abandonment. She is the author of her own future. It is a profound piercing of the veil of her own subjugation.
That is an incredibly empowering reframing of her trauma. And Estrilda isn't the only small, vulnerable creature running from capture and finding a new home. The narrative introduces a parallel storyline with an entirely different tone. We meet Thimble.
Thimble is a rabbit, but in this world, some animals possess deep intelligence and speech.
Thimble's family was living peacefully until they were captured by cruel mercenary trappers and dragged in wooden cages to be sold at a chaotic city market.
It is a devastating loss of his entire community.
Thimble manages to escape only because a clumsy merchant drops his cage, shattering the wood. Thimble bolts into the wilderness, deeply traumatized, grieving the loss of his parents and siblings. He wanders for weeks, starving and isolated.
And through a stroke of profound serendipity, his wandering leads him to the manicured, massive royal palace gardens,
where he is discovered hiding under a rose bush by none other than King Hillig himself. Now, King Hillig is surrounded by courtiers and generals, but he is profoundly lonely because Queen Boudica is still overseas.
He is carrying the immense weight of the looming war.
Yeah.
When he finds this shivering, traumatized rabbit, he doesn't call a gardener to shoo it away.
He sits down in the dirt, offers it a carrot, and they strike up a conversation. They become incredibly fast friends. Hillig actually appoints Thimble as a royal messenger because Thimble can run faster through the kingdom's secret tunnels than any horse on the roads.
This unlikely bond between a grieving king and a traumatized rabbit introduces the term Venomoyar, the patchwork loom.
The glossary beautifully relates this to kintsugi, the ancient Japanese art of repairing broken pottery by filling the cracks with lacquer dusted with powdered gold, treating the breakage and repair as part of the object's history rather than something to disguise.
The elven definition represents two lost, fractured souls consciously weaving their broken, disparate lives together to form a shared purpose, creating an entirely new structure of beauty out of their mutual loss.
It perfectly illustrates that family isn't strictly defined by blood or origin. It is the patchwork of companions you gather along the road who are willing to share the weight of your grief and help heal your isolation.
But the text is very careful not to let things get too comfortable. Because while Istrilda has found a warm hearth with Mary, and Thimble has found a friend in the king, their combined newfound agency leads them into a terrifying amount of trouble.
Yes, Istrilda and Thimble inevitably cross paths, and the combination of her reckless curiosity and his speed proves to be a highly volatile mix.
One night, the moon is full, and Istrilda is looking out her bedroom window in Mary's cottage. Thimble hops up onto the sill. They look across the churning dark river and see the silhouette of the legendary ruined Chatton Castle.
Instead of staying safely in bed, Istrilda's hubris takes over. She wants to prove she isn't scared of anything anymore, so she and Thimble sneak out, navigate the dense, foggy forest, cross a slippery fallen log over the river, and arrive at the castle gates.
They manage to sneak past a sleeping, heavily armed guard and slip inside the massive oak doors.
The atmosphere inside the ruins is incredibly oppressive and deeply unsettling.
It is pure Gothic horror. They walk into this colossal entry hall, and it is lined with dozens of massive stone statues of ancient gods and forgotten heroes.
But the terrifying detail is that every single statue has been deliberately physically turned around. They are all facing away from the entrance, their cold stone eyes staring menacingly up a dark, winding spiral staircase. It is the most explicit, silent warning imaginable. Do not go up those stairs.
But Istrilda, high on her own recent rebellion, ignores the environmental warnings. She wanders into what used to be a grand dining hall. She's so swept up in the romanticism of the ruins that she begins to hallucinate.
She imagines the hall fully restored, filled with courtiers waltzing to beautiful music, chandeliers gleaming with hundreds of candles, a massive feast on the table.
She is literally dancing by herself in the dust. Until the illusion is violently shattered. The sound of the waltz is replaced by a wet, heavy, rhythmic tapping sound coming from the corridor.
Thimble, to his credit, puffs up his chest and tries to act brave, standing in front of Istrilda. But then, the massive reinforced oak door of the dining hall doesn't just open, it is completely crushed inward, splintering into heavy shards of wood.
And stepping through the ruined frame is the physical manifestation of the kingdom's predicament. A massive charcoal gray ogre wielding a gnarled, blood-stained club.
The ogre spots them, lets out a deafening roar that shakes the dust from the ceiling, and a desperate, terrifying chase ensues. Istrilda grabs Thimble and they sprint blindly through the dark, labyrinthine marble corridors.
The ogre is right behind them, its heavy footsteps cracking the floorboards. Plaster and stone rain down on them as the ogre wildly smashes its club through the walls trying to crush them.
They are cornered in a hallway, and their only option is to dive headfirst out of a shattered, second-story stained glass window.
They plummet into the overgrown, thorny bushes of the castle grounds. But the nightmare isn't over. A freezing fog rolls in off the river, and the temperature plummets.
And within the fog, they encounter the Dark Watchers. The text describes them as unseen, shifting spirits that howl in the wind, circling the children, feeding on their terror.
Istrilda and Thimble sprint blindly toward the sound of the river, but the ogre has tracked the light of Istrilda's small lantern and bursts through the tree line right behind them.
To escape being smashed into the mud, Istrilda clutches Thimble to her chest and throws herself off the steep bank, plunging straight into the freezing, violent current of the river.
The ogre is left raging on the muddy bank, roaring in frustration, swinging its club at the water, because its massive density means it would sink and drown in the fast current.
The current drags Istrilda and Thimble downstream for miles, battering them against rocks. They barely manage to claw their way onto the sandy bank just as the sun is coming up.
They stumble back to the village, shivering violently, covered head to toe in freezing mud, blood, and scratches. And waiting for them on the porch of the cottage, arms crossed, is Mary.
And this is where we see the vital application of domestic discipline.
Mary is absolutely furious. She doesn't hug Istrilda. She gives her a harsh scolding, hands her a heavy wooden washboard and a bucket of freezing lye water. and makes her spend 3 hours scrubbing the mud off the wooden porch on her hands and knees.
But the brilliance of Mary's character shines later that afternoon. After Mary goes to the village well and hears the terrifying gossip that an ogre was spotted raging on the riverbank, she realizes how close Estrilda came to death.
But she doesn't lock the girl in the room. Instead, she brings Estrilda out to the expansive vegetable garden behind the cottage.
This transition from the terror of the castle to the quiet order of the garden is essential.
Mary introduces Estrilda to her cousin Beatrice, an elderly woman with deep, soil-stained hands. Beatrice sits Estrilda down in the dirt and teaches her an ancient agricultural lesson about planting the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash.
Beatrice explains the biology. You cannot plant them in isolated rows. They must be planted together in the exact same mound of dirt.
The biology here is a perfect metaphor for systemic survival. The corn grows tall and straight, providing a sturdy vertical stalk for the beans to climb toward the sun.
The beans, in return, are nitrogen fixers. They pull nitrogen from the air and feed it directly into the soil to nourish the heavy-feeding corn.
And the squash grows massive, broad leaves low to the ground, creating a dark, cool microclimate that retains moisture and suffocates competitive weeds.
I was geeking out over this. It is highly advanced indigenous agricultural technology framed as folklore. It's the ultimate group project. One sister provides the structure, one provides the nutrients, and one provides the protection. They cannot thrive in isolation.
And this botanical lesson introduces our final elven glossary term, laurelente, the dripleaf cascade.
The text connects this to the Maori concept of kaitiakitanga, the deep sense of guardianship and conservation of the sky, sea, and land, and the German agricultural design principles of permaculture.
Laurelente is defined as a sacred botanical inheritance, the intentional passing down of deep knowledge and profound reverence for the interconnectedness of nature to ensure the survival of the next generation.
But I want to zoom in on Mary's parenting strategy here. Why, on the very day that Estrilda nearly gets her skull crushed by an ogre, does Mary respond with a quiet lesson about planting vegetables?
Mary possesses immense psychological insight. She recognizes that Estrilda's core nature is like, as she says, wild mint. She is invasive, she wants to spread, to explore, to test boundaries.
Mary knows that if she responds with the brutal, restrictive beatings that Sister Thorn used, Estrilda will simply pick the lock and run away again.
The lesson of Laurelente in the garden is Mary giving Estrilda a new framework for her independence.
She's showing her that independence doesn't mean isolation.
Precisely. The garden teaches Estrilda that true, sustainable growth requires putting down deep roots and actively supporting those around you. It channels Estrilda's reckless, independent energy into an understanding of profound interdependence and nurturing patience. Mary is giving her a structure to climb, just like the corn provides for the beans.
It is brilliant. And as we watch all of these characters, Jack, Sophia, Maria, Elinor, Edward, Estrilda, Finn, and Mary, growing, adapting, and finding their anchors, the narrative suddenly pulls us all the way back to where we started. We return to Shan Shai, the storyteller.
Yes. We find Shan Shai sitting in the dusty, quiet archives of the monastery library. He is surrounded by towering stacks of parchment, incident reports from the borders, weather logs, and personal letters.
He is operating as the ultimate intelligence analyst. He's looking at this massive stack of seemingly random, isolated stories, and he finally spots the terrifying narrative through line.
He realizes the physical, unnatural storms battering the west coast, the sudden unification of the warring goblins in the eastern hills, the dark magic corrupting the banyan tree, the trolls moving closer to the manors, the ogre at Chatton Castle. These are not isolated problems.
They are tributaries, all flowing rapidly toward one central geographical nexus, Lake Luminea.
The convergence is happening. And the text shifts back to the characters to show us this convergence playing out in real time.
We rejoin Maria, the seamstress who fled the corrupted forest. She is honoring her vow to return with allies. She is on a terrifying, precarious ferry ride, crossing the churning black waters of Lake Luminea to reach the shores of the western woods. The water itself feels hostile.
And when the ferry finally scrapes against the muddy bank, the magic re-enters the fray.
Maria steps off the boat, opens her leather satchel, and the will-o'-the-wisps, the mischievous balls of blue light that first led her to the corrupted tree, burst out into the air.
And they immediately start causing absolute chaos in the dark forest. They are surfing on falling maple seeds, juggling wet acorns buzzing around Maria's head. But then they coalesce and start singing a highly specific, scandalous, rhyming song about a creature named Grumblewarble.
The specificity of the song is critical intelligence. Grumblewarble is revealed to be a shape-shifting toad, operating as the chief spy and infiltrator for an ancient, dark entity named Mercandoon, who rules from the center of the bloated bog.
The lyrics of the Wisp song are wild. They sing that Grumblewarble turns into a silver fish called Glimmergill to spy on the ferryman in the water. He shapeshifts into a spiky hedgehog called Pricklepine to listen to the rangers on land, and he even turns into a fragrant plant called Flitterfern to eavesdrop on the whispers of the bees.
The reach of Mercandoon's surveillance is absolute. But the eldest, brightest wisp flies up to Maria's face and delivers a crucial piece of advice. It tells her she must learn to see beyond what her physical eyes tell her, to watch how the chaos flows, to see the wind, not just the leaves it blows.
And in that exact moment of revelation, Maria is suddenly surrounded. Shadowy, heavily armed figures emerge silently from the sunlit clearing, bows drawn.
But it isn't a goblin ambush. It is Elinor, the protector, and her elite rangers. They, too, were guided to this exact clearing by the erratic lights of the wisps.
The disparate storylines literally collide. The traumatized seamstress and the hardened military commander cross paths. They lower their weapons, and a rapid exchange of intelligence occurs.
They realize that their individual pieces of the puzzle form a horrifying picture. Marie even suggests that to survive what is coming, they must ride out and recruit Sir Edward, despite his arrogance, because they need his heavy cavalry.
This convergence brings us back to Shanchai in the library, dipping his quill into the ink to record his final synthesis of the predicament.
I am looking at Shanchai's notes, and I want you to distill this for us. What is the ultimate philosophical realization that Shanchai arrives at regarding the nature of this impending war?
Shanchai's synthesis is the thesis of the entire text. He realizes that the old, rigid codes of the kingdom, Sir Edward's outdated chivalry, the isolationist policies of the villages, the reliance on massive, slow armies, will guarantee their extinction.
The enemy, Mercandoon, is fundamentally adapting. He is weaponizing unity. He is taking chaotic, warring goblin tribes and forging them into a disciplined military machine. He is using shape-shifting spies like Grumblewarble to exploit their blind spots.
If the darkness is uniting, isolation is death.
Exactly. Therefore, the heroes must mirror that adaptation. A grieving seamstress, an arrogant knight, a tactical protector, a brilliant blacksmith, a defiant orphan, and a traumatized rabbit.
Their shared traumas, their individual strengths, from Edward's brutal adaptability to Sophia's fierce compassion to Finn's metallurgical alchemy, must intersect.
Their absolute solidarity is the only weapon strong enough to push back the corruption and restore what the elves refer to as the Yondalinde, the deep, harmonious, sustaining rhythm of the forest. The predicament demands an evolution of community.
Wow. I am just sitting here absorbing the sheer scale of this narrative. We have journeyed from the existential despair of a single fading candle in a damp room all the way to a massive, kingdom-spanning alliance forming in a sunlit clearing to stave off the apocalypse.
And what makes this deep dive so powerful is that it all comes right back to you, the listener.
The architecture of this fantasy is built entirely out of the raw materials of our own reality.
Exactly. Just like the characters in this story, you might be looking at the horizon of your own life and seeing dark clouds gathering. You might be facing your own professional or personal storms.
Maybe you are feeling entirely aimless and adrift like Jack, and you need to aggressively practice Romuletti's solidarity by stepping out of your own apathy to anchor someone else.
Or maybe you are facing a devastating hard truth like Maria, and you are seeking your own Nesanari, your lotus flame, by radically accepting the glade where you cannot go, and allowing that fire to forge a new maturity in you.
The psychological tools are all laid out in the text, whether it is the practice of finding the quiet eye of your own mental hurricane, or realizing that true courage sometimes requires the humility to throw a handful of gravel at a metaphorical troll instead of rigidly playing by the rules that are ensuring your defeat.
We are going to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. This epic story ends on a massive cliffhanger, with the heroes standing in the clearing, gathering their strength, fully preparing to step into the mud of war.
But look closely at your own life, your own career, your own community. When the narrative map gets washed away and you realize you are facing a predicament, not just a problem, What stolen knight steel is your enemy currently wielding?
And more importantly, when the tempest hits, are you going to be the passive storyteller just observing the chaos from the absolute safety of a stone fortress? Or are you the one willing to grab a lantern, step out into the freezing rain, and wade into the muddy waters to find the lotus? The pen is in your hand.
Beautifully articulated.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly expansive deep dive. Until next time, embrace the chaos of your own epic journey, and we will see you in the mud.